My husband and his mother stole my father's $300,000 will, and the strangest part was that they thought I would never find out. I didn't cry when I discovered it. I didn't confront anyone. I simply folded the document, placed it back on the polished oak table in the attorney's office, and smiled. Looking back now, that smile was the beginning of the end for both of them. I'm Evelyn Parker, 67 years old, born and raised in Ohio, and until that afternoon, I believed I knew exactly who my husband was. Richard and I had been married for 42 years. We raised a family together. We paid our bills on time. We attended church on Sundays. We built what most people would call a respectable life. His mother, Gloria Parker, was 88 and still carried herself like the matriarch of every room she entered. For years, I ignored her controlling nature because keeping peace seemed easier than fighting battles that never truly ended. 8 months had passed since my father, Thomas Whitmore, died. Even now, I could still picture him sitting on the porch of his farmhouse, sipping coffee from a chipped ceramic mug while watching the sunrise over the fields. He wasn't a wealthy man by the standards of television dramas, but he had worked hard his entire life. Every dollar he saved carried a story. Every acre of land reflected decades of sacrifice. After his passing, I was told that his estate had been settled according to his wishes. The process seemed straightforward. The attorney handled the paperwork. The accounts were distributed. The property was transferred. Life moved on, or at least that was what I thought. Then came the phone call. Andrew Collins, my father's longtime attorney, sounded uneasy. He asked if I could stop by his office because he had discovered a discrepancy in some archived files. His exact words were simple, but something in his tone settled heavily in my chest. The next morning, I drove 30 miles in a town beneath gray autumn skies. The office looked exactly as it always had. The same brick exterior, the same brass plaque beside the door, the same quiet waiting room filled with leather chairs and old magazines. Andrew greeted me personally and led me into a conference room. A thick file rested on the table between us. He removed a document from the folder and slid it toward me. At first glance, it looked ordinary. Then I noticed the date. My stomach tightened. The date didn't match the will I had previously received. I kept reading. Each line seemed colder than the last. There it was, a version of my father's will that redirected nearly $300,000 away from the estate plan I had been shown months earlier. My eyes moved slowly across the page until they reached the signatures. One signature belonged to my father. The other signatures belonged to witnesses. Everything appeared legitimate. Everything looked official. Yet something felt terribly wrong. Andrew cleared his throat. This document appeared in storage records that should have been reviewed months ago, he said carefully. I thought you needed to see it. I stared at the paper. My hands remained perfectly still. My heartbeat did not. Then I noticed another detail. A notation referencing a retrieval request submitted shortly after my father's funeral. The name attached to that request was one I recognized instantly. Richard Parker, my husband. I looked up at Andrew, but he said nothing. He didn't need to. Questions were already forming faster than answers. Why would Richard access my father's legal records without telling me? Why would Gloria spend weeks asking about estate documents immediately after the funeral? Why had both of them acted so interested in paperwork they claimed not to understand? For months, I had ignored those memories. Now they returned one by one, fitting together like pieces of a puzzle I never wanted to solve. I folded the document carefully and placed it back on the table. Outside the window, leaves drifted across the parking lot in the cold October wind. Inside that quiet room, a lifetime of trust began to crack. Because if this document was real, then the will I had received 8 months earlier could not be. And if that was true, someone had been lying to me from the very beginning. The drive home felt longer than 30 miles that day. I kept both hands on the steering wheel and stared at the road ahead, while memories I had not thought about in months began resurfacing one after another. After my father died, everything had happened so quickly. The funeral brought relatives from 3 different states. There were casseroles on kitchen counters, sympathy cards stacked beside lamps, and endless conversations that blurred together until I could barely remember who had said what. During those first weeks, grief made every day feel heavy. I spent mornings sitting alone at my dining room table with a cup of coffee growing cold beside me. My father and I had spoken nearly every day. Suddenly, the phone never rang. The silence settled into every corner of my life. Looking back now, That was when Richard began acting differently. At the time, I mistook it for concern. He insisted on helping organize my father's paperwork. He offered to make calls on my behalf. He volunteered to handle details that I was too exhausted to think about. Everyone told me how fortunate I was to have such a supportive husband. I believed them. Gloria seemed unusually interested as well. She called almost every afternoon asking questions that felt harmless back then. Had the farm been sold yet? Was there a life insurance policy? Did my father keep records in a safe deposit box? I answered politely because I assumed she was making conversation. Now those questions echoed in my mind with an entirely different meaning. One evening, only a few days after the funeral, I remember finding Richard sitting alone in the den surrounded by folders and envelopes. He quickly closed one file when I walked into the room. When I asked what he was doing, he smiled and said he was helping sort paperwork so I would not have to worry about it. I thanked him. That memory made my stomach turn now. Another detail surfaced. About 3 weeks after the funeral, Gloria invited us to dinner. Throughout the meal, she steered every conversation back toward finances. She spoke about estate taxes, property values, and inheritance laws despite claiming she knew nothing about legal matters. At one point, she casually asked whether my father had ever changed his will during the final years of his life. I remember feeling surprised by the question. Richard answered before I could. He told her that everything had already been settled and there was nothing to discuss. The exchange lasted less than a minute, yet now it felt important. Small moments continued returning as I drove. Richard taking unexpected phone calls outside. Gloria whispering with him in the kitchen when they thought I was asleep. A missing folder that later reappeared in a different cabinet. Each memory alone seemed insignificant. Together, they formed a pattern I could no longer ignore. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the afternoon sun was beginning to sink behind the trees. The house looked exactly the same as it had that morning. The white shutters, the neatly trimmed lawn, the flower beds near the porch. Yet something fundamental had changed. For the first time in 42 years, I questioned whether I truly knew the man waiting inside. I sat in my parked car for several minutes before turning off the engine. Then another thought struck me with unsettling clarity. During the weeks after my father died, both Richard and Gloria had repeatedly asked about one specific thing. Not the farmhouse, not the savings account, not the land. They wanted to know whether anyone besides me knew the combination to my father's safe deposit box. That question followed me into the house and stayed with me throughout the evening. Richard was already home when I walked through the front door. He was sitting in his usual chair in the living room, watching a news program with the volume low. Nothing about him appeared unusual. He smiled when he saw me. He asked how my day had gone. For a moment, I wondered if I was imagining everything. 42 years of marriage does not disappear in a single afternoon. Yet something had changed. I could feel it. I answered carefully and carried my purse into the kitchen. While preparing dinner, I watched him through the doorway. He looked relaxed, comfortable, completely unaware that I had spent the afternoon reviewing documents connected to my father's estate. I decided not to mention Andrew's phone call. Not yet. If there was an explanation, I wanted to hear it when the time was right. If there was not, I needed more information before revealing what I knew. That night, after Richard went to bed, I remained downstairs with a cup of tea. The house was quiet except for the ticking clock above the fireplace. I found myself thinking about my father's safe deposit box. He had rented it at a local bank nearly 20 years earlier. Most people assumed important documents were stored there, but my father was a careful man. He believed in backups. He often joked that paperwork should never exist in only one place. At the time, I thought it was simply one of his habits. Now I wondered whether he had been trying to tell me something. The following morning, I drove to the bank shortly after it opened. The building sat on a corner lot near downtown, unchanged from the last time I visited with my father years earlier. Inside, a young employee helped me locate the records associated with the box. I expected very little. Instead, I found something that immediately caught my attention. There had been a visitor log. Every access request had been recorded. My father's name appeared repeatedly over the years. After his death, only one additional entry appeared before the account was officially closed. I stared at the date. It was 6 days after the funeral. My pulse quickened. The visitor listed on the form was not me. It was Richard. I asked whether anyone had accompanied him. The employee could not provide details, but she confirmed that a second signature appeared as a witness on the access record. I requested a copy. When she handed it to me, I recognized the name instantly. Gloria Parker. I sat motionless for several seconds. They had gone together. Neither of them had ever mentioned it. Not once. During all those months, they had allowed me to believe that estate matters were settled normally. Yet 6 days after burying my father, they visited his safe deposit box without telling me. Outside, the autumn air felt colder than before. I remained in my car studying the photocopy. Questions multiplied faster than answers. What had they removed? What had they seen? Most importantly, why had they hidden it from me? Then my phone rang. The caller identification displayed a name I had not seen in nearly a year. Martha Reed, my father's closest friend. The moment I answered, her first sentence made my heart skip. She said there was something she should have told me months ago. I pulled into a grocery store parking lot before returning Martha's call. My hands felt steady, but there was a weight in my chest that had been growing since I left the bank. Martha answered immediately. Her voice sounded older than I remembered, softer somehow, yet there was urgency beneath every word. She asked whether I was alone. When I told her I was, she remained silent for a moment. Then she told me about a conversation she had overheard nearly 7 months earlier. According to Martha, she had visited Andrew Collins's office to update some documents of her own. While sitting in the waiting area, she noticed Richard and Gloria leaving one of the conference rooms. She remembered it because she found it unusual. Neither of them had any reason to be handling my father's legal affairs without me present. At the time, she assumed I must have been somewhere else in the building. Only later did she learn that I had never attended that meeting. I listened without interrupting. Every sentence added another piece to a puzzle that was becoming impossible to ignore. Martha explained that she almost called me back then. She said something had felt wrong. Yet she hesitated because she did not want to create conflict in my family during a period of grief. For months, she convinced herself there was probably an innocent explanation. Then, several weeks ago, she ran into an employee who had previously worked at the law office. During a casual conversation, the employee mentioned seeing Richard return more than once after my father's funeral. Not with me. Alone. I closed my eyes. The parking lot outside my windshield seemed to disappear. All I could see were memories. Richard offering to handle paperwork. Richard insisting I rest while he made phone calls. Richard reassuring me that everything was under control. Martha continued speaking. She said there was one more detail. During the meeting she witnessed, Gloria appeared. Unusually pleased. That was the exact word she used. Pleased. Not grieving. Not concerned. Pleased. After ending the call, I sat quietly for several minutes. Then I drove somewhere I had not visited since the estate was settled. My father's farmhouse stood at the end of a narrow country road lined with maple trees. The property had already been transferred according to the documents I received months earlier, but the house itself remained mostly untouched. As I walked through the front door, familiar scents greeted me. Old wood, dust, coffee lingering in memories rather than reality. The silence felt different there. Less lonely, more watchful. I moved slowly through each room. Nothing appeared disturbed. Yet when I entered my father's study, I stopped. A small cabinet stood beneath the window. It was where he stored personal correspondence, receipts, and family records. The top drawer slid open easily. The second drawer did not. I pulled harder. Finally, it moved. Inside, I found empty space where a large sealed envelope should have been. I knew exactly what was missing because my father had shown it to me years earlier. He told me never to worry if important documents disappeared because he always kept copies. At the time, I laughed at his caution. Standing there now, I was no longer laughing. Someone had removed that envelope. Someone who knew exactly where to find it. And the only people with access to this house during those weeks were Richard and Gloria. I left the farmhouse carrying more questions than answers. The missing envelope stayed on my mind during the entire drive back to town. My father had always been organized. He labeled folders, dated receipts, and kept duplicate records whenever something mattered. If an envelope disappeared, it was not because he misplaced it. Someone had taken it. That realization pushed me to call Andrew Collins again. He agreed to meet the following morning. When I arrived at his office, he already had several folders spread across the conference table. Sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting narrow lines across stacks of paperwork that suddenly seemed far more important than they had a week earlier. Andrew listened carefully as I described the visitor log, Martha's phone call, and the missing envelope. He did not interrupt. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and folded his hands. Then he told me something unexpected. During a routine review of archived estate records, he had noticed inconsistencies between filing dates and document access requests. Certain records connected to my father's estate had been viewed multiple times after his death. That alone was unusual. Most estates generated little activity once distribution was complete. My father's records, however, showed repeated access over several weeks. Andrew opened a folder and slid several copies toward me. Each page contained timestamps, authorization requests, and internal tracking notes. I studied them carefully. Richard's name appeared more than once. Gloria's appeared as well. Neither had ever mentioned returning to the office after the initial paperwork was completed. Andrew pointed to another document. It showed that a certified copy request had been submitted shortly after the safe deposit box visit. My stomach tightened. Whoever requested those copies was gathering information methodically. This was not curiosity. It looked deliberate. We spent nearly 2 hours reviewing records. By the end, a timeline began to emerge. The funeral occurred first. 6 days later came the safe deposit box visit. Then the meetings at the law office. Then the certified copy requests. Then several document retrieval authorizations. Each event connected neatly to the next. The pattern was impossible to ignore. Before I left, Andrew handed me the name of a retired records specialist named Benjamin Hayes. He occasionally assisted attorneys with historical document research and estate investigations. Andrew believed Benjamin might be able to trace where certain copies had been sent. That afternoon I called him. Benjamin spoke calmly and asked detailed questions. He agreed to review everything. 3 days later, he contacted me with his first findings. Some of the document requests appeared linked to a financial institution located nearly 40 miles away. I had never done business there. My father had not either, at least not to my knowledge. Benjamin explained that the records suggested someone connected to the estate had submitted paperwork involving beneficiary verification. The phrase echoed in my mind. Beneficiary verification. Someone had been attempting to establish ownership rights connected to estate assets. As I sat alone at my kitchen table that evening, I looked across the room at Richard reading a magazine as though nothing had changed. He smiled when our eyes met. I smiled back. Neither of us said a word. But for the first time, I realized the trail was leading somewhere very specific. And according to Benjamin's early findings, the person positioned to benefit most from those efforts might not have been Richard at all. For the next several days, I said very little. Benjamin continued tracing records while I continued pretending that nothing had changed. It was not difficult. After 4 decades of marriage, routines become automatic. Richard drank coffee at 6:30 every morning. He read the newspaper at the kitchen table. He watched the evening news before bed. From the outside, our life looked exactly the same. Inside, everything felt different. Every conversation carried a second meaning. Every smile made me wonder what remained hidden. Benjamin called me on a Thursday afternoon. His voice sounded more serious than before. He asked whether I could meet him in person. An hour later, I sat across from him in a quiet office filled with filing cabinets and stacks of old records. He opened a folder and placed several documents on the desk. The first page contained account information connected to the financial institution he had mentioned earlier. The second contained beneficiary records. The third contained correspondence requests tied to estate documentation. I read each page slowly. Then I reached the name listed as the primary beneficiary. It was not Richard Parker. It was Gloria Parker. For a moment, I simply stared at the paper. Benjamin explained that the records suggested a coordinated effort to establish Gloria as the recipient of assets connected to my father's estate. The amount involved was close to $300,000. My father had never been close to Gloria. They were polite to one another, but that was all. There was no logical reason he would intentionally redirect such a large portion of his estate to his son-in-law's mother. Benjamin agreed. He believed someone had been working backward, gathering documents first and attempting to justify ownership afterward. The more records he reviewed, the clearer the pattern became. Every major step connected back to Gloria. The meetings, the requests, the follow-up communications. Richard appeared repeatedly as the person facilitating access, but Gloria appeared as the individual positioned to benefit. Suddenly, dozens of old memories made sense. Gloria constantly asking questions about finances. Gloria insisting she understood how estates should be handled. Gloria behaving unusually cheerful after the funeral. Richard had always seemed to be the driving force behind my suspicions. Now I realized he might have been following someone else's plan. Benjamin handed me another document. It contained a timeline of activities compiled from public filings and authorization records. As I studied it, one detail stood out immediately. Several actions occurred before my father's death, during the final months of his illness. That changed everything. This was not a decision made during grief. It was preparation. Someone had been planning far earlier than I imagined. I drove home in silence. The autumn sky hung low and gray above the highway. By the time I reached the house, Richard was already there. He greeted me with his usual smile and asked whether I wanted takeout for dinner. I nodded and thanked him. Then I went upstairs and sat alone in the guest bedroom. I opened the folder again and reviewed every page. Near the bottom of the final document was a note from Benjamin. It contained only one sentence. Thomas Whitmore may have suspected document interference before his death. I read that sentence 3 times. My father had always been careful, cautious, observant. If he sensed something was wrong, there was a chance he had prepared for it. And if he had prepared for it, there might still be something out there that Gloria and Richard never found. The next morning, I called Andrew before Richard left the house. I waited until I heard his car disappear down the street before speaking freely. When I told him what Benjamin had discovered, the line remained silent for several seconds. Then Andrew asked me to come to his office immediately. By noon, I was seated across from him once again. He looked different than he had during our previous meetings. More focused, more determined. A large archive box sat on the conference table between us. Andrew explained that after hearing Benjamin's conclusions, he requested access to several older storage records connected to my father's legal files. Most had already been reviewed months earlier. One had not. He opened the box and carefully removed a sealed envelope. The sight of it sent a chill through me. It was the same type of envelope that had disappeared from my father's study. My father's handwriting covered the front. I recognized it instantly. Andrew placed it on the table without opening it. He told me the envelope had been discovered in an off-site storage facility used for long-term legal records. According to inventory logs, it had been deposited nearly a year before my father died. Nobody had requested it. Nobody had accessed it. Nobody even seemed aware it existed. My hands trembled slightly as I looked at my father's familiar handwriting. Andrew broke the seal and removed the contents. Inside was a letter and several legal documents. I read the first page slowly. My father addressed it directly to me. He wrote that if I was reading the letter, it meant questions had arisen regarding his estate. He explained that during the final years of his life, several unusual requests had been made concerning his finances and legal affairs. He never identified specific individuals, but he admitted he had become concerned enough to create additional safeguards. I felt tears gathering in my eyes. Even in his final years, my father had been trying to protect me. Andrew then handed me another document. This one contained witness signatures, notarization records, and legal confirmations supporting my father's original estate intentions. Everything was detailed. Everything was documented. Most importantly, it directly contradicted the version of events that appeared to benefit Gloria. My father had anticipated the possibility of interference and prepared evidence to defend his wishes. The room felt suddenly brighter. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something I had almost forgotten. Hope. Andrew continued reviewing the materials. Every page strengthened our position. Every signature matched authenticated records. Every date aligned perfectly with established timelines. There were even notes from independent witnesses who had participated in earlier estate meetings. The deeper we looked, the stronger the evidence became. Whoever believed they had erased the truth had failed. My father had left a trail too thorough to destroy. Before I left, Andrew informed me that he intended to schedule a formal review meeting involving all relevant parties. The evidence needed to be presented officially. Certain questions needed answers. Certain records needed explanations. I agreed immediately. As I drove home that evening, the sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and gold. For the first time in weeks, I did not feel overwhelmed. I felt prepared. Someone had spent months trying to rewrite my father's wishes. Someone had counted on missing documents, hidden meetings, and quiet manipulation. What they never expected was that Thomas Whitmore had prepared one final surprise. And very soon, Everyone involved would have to face it. The review meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday morning. Andrew chose a private conference room at his office, large enough to accommodate everyone involved. I arrived early. The long wooden table stood beneath soft lighting, and neatly arranged folders rested at several seats. Through the window, I could see a cold November rain falling across the parking lot. Andrew sat beside me reviewing notes. Benjamin arrived a few minutes later carrying additional records. Neither man appeared nervous. They looked prepared. At exactly 10 o'clock, Richard entered the room with Gloria. The confidence on Gloria's face was impossible to miss. She carried herself the way she always had, as though every situation would ultimately bend in her favor. Richard looked less comfortable, but he still managed a polite smile when he saw me. I returned the gesture. No one raised their voice. No one exchanged accusations. The room remained calm. That was exactly what Andrew wanted. Once everyone was seated, he began reviewing the estate timeline. At first, Gloria appeared bored. Richard checked his watch twice. Then Andrew introduced the first set of records. Visitor logs, document access requests, certified copy authorizations. The atmosphere shifted almost immediately. Gloria straightened in her chair. Richard stopped looking at his watch. One by one, Andrew presented the evidence. Dates matched. Signatures matched. Filing records matched. Every document connected to the next. Every question led toward the same conclusion. Gloria attempted to dismiss several details as misunderstandings. Andrew simply responded by placing additional records on the table. Benjamin explained how the paper trail had been reconstructed. He described the sequence of requests and authorizations. He explained how beneficiary records connected to financial institutions 40 miles away. The room grew quieter with every passing minute. Then Andrew introduced the envelope recovered from storage. I watched Gloria carefully. For the first time all morning, uncertainty crossed her face. The contents were reviewed in full. My father's letter, his authenticated instructions, witness statements, supporting documentation, independent confirmations. Each page strengthened the same message. Thomas Whitmore had anticipated interference and had taken steps to preserve his actual intentions. Richard lowered his eyes toward the table. Gloria remained silent. Andrew continued. He presented notarization records that directly supported the original estate plan. He compared them against later documents that had raised concerns. The differences were impossible to ignore. The evidence did not rely on assumptions. It relied on facts. By then, the confidence that Gloria carried into the room had largely disappeared. Yet the most surprising moment had not arrived. Near the end of the meeting, Andrew introduced one final witness statement. The statement came from an individual who had participated in a legal review session months before my father's death. According to that witness, Thomas specifically expressed concern that someone might attempt to alter or misrepresent his wishes after he was gone. He instructed that backup documentation be preserved for that exact reason. The words settled over the room like a final piece falling into place. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Rain continued tapping softly against the window. I looked across the table at Richard. He no longer appeared confident. He appeared tired. Gloria stared at the documents in front of her without saying a word. Then, just when it seemed the meeting was over, Andrew opened one last folder. Inside was a record nobody outside our investigative team knew existed, and the name attached to it belonged to someone neither Richard nor Gloria expected to hear. Andrew slowly removed the final record from the folder and placed it at the center of the table. The name on the document belonged to my father's longtime accountant, a man named Robert Keller. I recognized it immediately. Robert had worked with my father for nearly 20 years and had always been known for keeping meticulous records. Several months before my father passed away, Robert had prepared a confidential memorandum documenting concerns Thomas expressed during financial reviews. Andrew handed copies to everyone in the room. The memorandum stated that my father had become increasingly uncomfortable with repeated inquiries about his estate from individuals outside his immediate legal team. It also confirmed that Thomas instructed multiple professionals to preserve independent records of his intentions in case questions ever arose later. The moment Gloria finished reading the first page, the color seemed to drain from her face. Richard remained silent. Andrew then presented supporting correspondence from Robert, notarized confirmations, and archived communications that matched the dates already established through the investigation. Every document pointed in the same direction. Every document supported the original estate plan. Every document contradicted the changes that appeared to benefit Gloria. There was no dramatic argument, no raised voices, no emotional outburst. The truth did not need any of those things. The documents spoke clearly on their own. After several minutes, Andrew concluded the review. He explained that based on the evidence, the original estate instructions could now be fully verified and enforced. The disputed assets would be distributed according to Thomas Whitmore's documented wishes. The attempts to redirect those assets would not stand. Silence filled the room. Rain continued falling outside the windows. Richard finally spoke. His voice sounded smaller than I had ever heard it. He admitted that he should have told me about the meetings and document requests. He claimed he believed he was helping simplify matters. I listened without interrupting. Months earlier, I might have accepted that explanation. Now I understood that trust once broken cannot be restored by a few carefully chosen words. Gloria said almost nothing. The confidence she carried into the meeting had disappeared completely. She gathered her papers slowly and avoided looking at anyone. For years, she had controlled conversations simply through force of personality. On that day, the records were stronger than personality. Facts were stronger than assumptions. By the time the meeting ended, the outcome was clear. The estate would be corrected. The assets would be returned to their proper distribution. The questions that haunted me for months finally had answers. A few weeks later, the legal process was completed. The financial matters were resolved. The records were updated. The uncertainty that had followed me since my father's death finally began to lift. Yet the greatest change was not financial. It was personal. I spent an afternoon at my father's farmhouse shortly before winter arrived. The trees were bare. The fields stretched quietly beneath a pale gray sky. I sat on the porch where he used to drink his morning coffee and looked across the land he loved. For the first time in a long while, I felt at peace. My father had understood something important. He knew that honesty sometimes requires protection. He knew that kindness should never be confused with weakness. Most of all, he knew that truth has a way of surviving, even when people try to bury it beneath paperwork, secrecy, and time. I took his final letter from my coat pocket and read it once more. Then I folded it carefully and placed it back where it belonged. The wind moved softly through the fields. The clouds began to part. And as I sat there watching the afternoon light spread across the farm, I realized that my father's final gift had never been the money. It was the chance to see people clearly, to protect what mattered, and to move forward with my dignity intact.